Our movie begins with a girl named Sarah. She's sitting with her family at dinner. Everything seems to be going well, but when she tries to leave to go to a party, her father, Don, refuses to let her go. Her mom, Irene, tries to get her to listen to Don as to not anger him, as well as her sister, Amy. Sarah then runs to her room upstairs in anger. Later at night, Sarah sneaks out to meet her boyfriend, Chris. They take his motorcycle and go to the party together. At the house, Don and Irene are on their way to Sarah's room when they realize that she sneaked out of the window. Don then tells Irene that she's a problem. In the woods, Chris and Sarah are having a moment together. He serenades her with a song he wrote for her, and they share a kiss. Then they spend the night of passion together. The following morning, Don is sitting on the front porch when Sarah arrives on the back of Chris' motorcycle. Don is furious with her disrespect and tells her that as long as she's in his house, she has to follow his rules. Sarah then tells him that she will leave anyways once she turns 18 and goes up to her room. Later that day, Don overhears Sarah talking with Irene and Amy about how she's gonna travel the 50 states once she turns 18, and both of her family members approve of her leaving without Don knowing. He then goes to the basement to think of a plan on how to stop his daughter from running away. 3 months later, Sarah is now a high school graduate. She's talking with Chris on the phone when Don tells her that he needs her help with lifting a box. He then takes her down to a bomb shelter hidden in the basement, but as soon as she sets the box down, Don locks her in and leaves her panicking. She tries to enter any number in the keypad that locks the door. Nevertheless, she tries too many wrong numbers, which causes the power in the room to shut down. A few days later, Sarah hides as she hears Don opening the door and pushes past him to run to the basement. She realizes that he has a second door with another keypad. Don then tells her she can scream as much as she likes. The room is soundproof. In addition to that, if she tries to put any numbers in the keypad, the power will go off, which will cut the room's ventilation system. He proceeds to tell her that she can't do anything without his permission now. He hits her and corners her against the door to sexually abuse her. Upstairs, Irene and Amy are talking to a police officer to find Sarah, who seems to be missing. He's trying his best to help them, but Don shows up and tells him that it's normal for Sarah to leave without telling anyone, and that there's some clothes and a travel bag missing from her closet. The officer then tells them since she's 18, there is not much they can do if she willingly ran away. Irene breaks down crying as Don is coldly comforting her. In the basement, Sarah reminisces about the times she and Chris had together. She remembers how he told her he would get her a pink helmet for his motorcycle and sings the song he wrote for her to keep herself grounded. The following morning, Chris stops by Sarah's house only to Don meeting him. He worriedly asks about her sudden disappearance, but Don tells him that she ran off with a guy named Steve to Florida. Hurt, Chris doesn't believe him, but then he remembers she told him about her plan to leave to Florida. He decides to take off, and Don goes back to the basement. In the basement, Don comes in to bring Sarah a birthday cake and a gift, which is a red slip dress. He tells her to try it on. Although terrified, Sarah does what he asks of her. He then asks her to pick something she wants in exchange of her having sex with him. She knows he will do it whether she refuses or accepts, so she picks a clock, and he gets it for her after he's done with her. A few weeks later, Sarah is opening up some canned food when the idea of her making a weapon out of the lid crosses her mind. She decides to lure Don by wearing the slip dress, and as soon as he gets closer, she tries to hit him, but he overpowers her and hits her till she falls on the ground. He tells her that she should stop trying to disobey him and forces himself on her again. Almost a year later, heavily pregnant Sarah is cleaning up when her water breaks. She tries not to freak out while skimming through a book about childbirth. She knows Don won't come down anytime soon, so she has to do it alone. She delivers her baby and decides to name her Mary. 3 years later, Sarah, who's pregnant again, congratulates Don on his promotion. Her daughter Mary is grown enough to talk and read. She has learned to survive from Don, as she must do what he asks for. She then tries to persuade Don into letting her out of the basement, but he yells at her and leaves to go upstairs. Upstairs, Don is having dinner with Irene and Amy. When Irene tells him that she wants to hire a private investigator to find Sarah, but he lashes out on her and tells her not to spend any more money on finding her. The following night, Mary is sick with the flu, and Sarah has no idea how to help her. Dawn ends up giving her some pills and tells her to figure it out. She argues that she needs to see a doctor, but he leaves her to deal with it alone. The following morning, Amy bumps into Chris outside of the house. He asks about Sarah, but she doesn't have any idea where she is. Then she learns that Dawn told him that she ran off with another guy, which she denies. She tells him she suspects that he might have a hand in her disappearance. In the basement, the kids are getting restless as they grow. They're eager to see the outside world, but Sarah knows that they can't do that, so she tries her best to keep them entertained by playing around the room with the flashlights. Upstairs, Irene is furious with Dawn's lies. She learns from Amy what he told to Chris, and he tries to defend himself, but both of the women now are completely distrustful of him, and Irene fully lashes out and breaks stuff everywhere. Dawn tries to go after her, but Amy notices that his keys fell from his pocket. Therefore, she tries to go to the basement and look for any clues, but Dawn catches her and tells her to leave after giving him his keys back. In the basement, Sarah delivers another baby boy. She decides to name him Thomas and manipulates Dawn into taking him upstairs to have Irene raise him. He isn't happy with the idea at first, but then she tells him she will have enough time for him with just Mary and Michael. The following morning, Irene opens the front door to find a baby crying on the doorstep. She then notices a note from Sarah left with the baby. She tells her she's doing okay with her new boyfriend, but since they don't have money, she's asking her to raise Thomas for her until she can come back. While Irene is in shock, she takes the baby inside. That's when Dawn notices that she left another hidden note in the crib. In the basement, Dawn confronts Sarah about the hidden note. She wanted to tell her mom that she's being held captive in the basement, but Dawn caught her first. He then throws her the slip dress and tells her to wear it so he can teach her a lesson. A few years later, Sarah is cutting Michael's hair when Mary comes out wearing makeup. Paranoia takes over Sarah when she realizes Dawn is starting to view Mary in a different way. She begs him not to touch her, and in response, he leaves and turns off the power, leaving them to sit close to the vent so they can breathe. A few years later, Irene is depressed was sitting in Sarah's room. When Thomas walks in on her, she asks her what she's doing here, and she replies that she just misses Sarah and wants to make everything perfect when she returns. Meanwhile, Sarah realizes it's raining when she notices water dripping from the ceiling. She grabs a spoon and tries to scrub the ceiling with it. Then she uses a flashlight to signal anyone for help, but a bystander notices a light flashing underneath a tree and goes to tell the house owner, Dawn. In the basement, Dawn walks in and immediately starts to hit Sarah. He learned from the bystander that Sarah was seeking help by signaling a flashlight. He kicks her in the stomach hard enough for her to miscarry, and Mary silently cries as she hears her mother screaming in pain. Dawn then buries the stillborn baby in the backyard. A few days later, Dawn criticizes Sarah's laziness and tells her that he might leave his job so they have to live with what he gives them. She then asks about Thomas, and he replies that he's doing well. Michael and Mary urge Dawn to take them to the outside world, but all he says that it depends on their mom's behavior. Later at night, the kids demand to know from Sarah why they are caged like animals, but Sarah breaks down from the pressure and starts trashing the room. A while after she calmed down, she gathers them and tells them the truth. Dawn is her father, who's been holding her captive for over 18 years, and they are the product of insect. Mary, upon hearing this, has an asthma attack. Michael is crying as he hysterically asks Sarah what's wrong with them, and she replies that there is nothing wrong with them and she loves them both. A few months later, Dawn gives Sarah her weekly groceries. When she finds it's not enough to feed her and both kids, Dawn then raises his voice at her and demands her to ration it. He also tells Sarah to take better care of herself, which makes Michael turn violent against him. He lunges at him and tries to beat him, but Dawn quickly pushes him off and leaves. Throughout the summer, Irene is growing more skeptical of Dawn when he gets fired from his job. She keeps asking him where all his money goes, but he never tells her anything. Dawn decides he can't support two families, so he decides to go to the garage and connect a tube from his car exhaust to the vent which Sarah and the kids breathe from. But fortunately, Thomas comes out to talk to him, which makes Dawn turn off the car engine. After his talk with Thomas, he realizes he would have made a mistake if he killed them like that. A year later, Sarah is trying to help Mary, who's having a severe asthma attack. She begs Dawn to take her to the hospital, but he doesn't care that much about them. Sarah then realizes he cares the most about Thomas, and she tells him that Thomas wouldn't want his sister to die. He agrees to take her to the hospital, but on the condition that Michael stays behind to ensure that Sarah doesn't run away. Inside the hospital, Mary is rushed into the ER as she's flatlining, but luckily, the doctors were able to save her. Afterwards, one of the doctors gives Dawn and Sarah a form to fill out, but Sarah decides to spill a cup of water on the paper so he can go and get another one. While he's distracted, Sarah makes a break for it, then runs across the hallway to a doctor and a police officer. She tells her, "I need help," and the officer right away holds Dawn for questioning. In Mary's room, Mary wakes up and asks her, "Where are they?" Sarah then responds that they are finally free. Dawn is going away for the rest of his life. Meanwhile, the police arrive at Dawn's house, and a team of paramedics carry Michael away from the basement to an ambulance. Both Thomas and Irene are at a loss of words from what's happening. A few weeks later, all three kids are outside playing together. While Sarah is relaxing with Amy and Irene, she hears the sound of motorcycle engine. Then she sees Chris, but he's all grown up now. At the lake, Chris is checking up on Sarah. He apologizes for not looking for her hard enough. She tells him that she thought about him every day for 20 years, and he surprises her with a pink helmet they talked about when they were younger. Then he offers to take her on a ride, and she says yes. Sarah can finally start to heal, and the movie ends.